It's really great to see you all today. Lovely to see so many friendly people in the audience. So like Catherine said, I'm going to give you the whistle-stop tour through my entrepreneurial journey and share a couple of key lessons I've learned. So my entrepreneurial journey started when I was 25 years old. I did this master's degree in leadership for sustainable development. It was my first positive experience of education. Before that, I had never felt very motivated at school or university, but this course was really vocational, so they really pushed you in the deep end. They sent you out on loads of work placements rather than putting you in the library, and it made me realise that I had this entrepreneurial spirit, and before that I didn't even know that I had any entrepreneurial drive at all. So during that year I met this amazing woman, Karina Millstone. We became very good friends. We realised we worked really well together during that year, so we left the course feeling really motivated and inspired to do something amazing. We were living together in London at the time, and we knew we wanted to do some kind of food-based project there. There was already loads and loads of food projects happening in London, but there was nothing around orchards, which was strange because London actually used to be covered in fruit trees, and nearly all of them have been lost now. So we came up with a name, the London Orchard Project. And our founding principle was about the idea of community ownership. So basically, we wanted to train community groups all over the city with access to land, so that could be access to their land in their housing estates or their schools or their parks, wherever there was local and they had access to land. And basically train them up to create their own community orchards, give them the resources to do it, and then the ongoing support to make sure that they were cared for long term. So that was the idea we had. We also had this nice logo, courtesy of our generous flatmate that did it for us for free. The problem was we didn't have any funding at all, and neither of us had the faintest idea how to plant a fruit tree or look after it. So we were kind of starting off on the back foot. And when we started going out to funders, they were basically just not very impressed at all, because they were looking for a track record and subject expertise, of which we had neither. So the first year was basically a bit rubbish. So all we did was, we did a lot of networking, we built up a team of experts, that went really well. The funding was much, much harder. So we basically just did funding application after funding application for 12 months, got rejection after rejection after rejection. I think the worst one was when we spent a whole summer doing a 10,000 word application. It's basically like writing a dissertation, thinking we'd get £100,000, and they came back and said, we're not going to give you anything. So that was a really, really tough year. But we finally, at the end of 12 months, got a grant of £6,000. And that, plus a bit of begging, stealing and borrowing, we managed to plant 6 community orchards with 6 groups around London. So this was our first year of planting. And off the back of that, even though it wasn't a huge thing, we got a track record. So we suddenly had 6 testimonials from these groups. We had a bit of a track record. And after that, the funding started coming to us. So over the next couple of years, we really built things up, and by 2012, we had enough funding to recruit 4 people. So this is our CEO, Kath Rosen. She's still with us today, and those were our first 3 project managers. And they really took it up to the next level because they had more appropriate skills. And by 2014, we were quite well established. So in that year, we were then approached by Heineken, which might seem a bit strange, but they owned the Bulmers cider brand. And they had a corporate social responsibility budget. They really wanted to do some kind of project with orchards. So they basically approached us and said, we love what you've done in London. Would you like to replicate it in 6 other cities around the UK? And we obviously jumped at the chance of that. So we went through a period of really rapid growth then. So we went from being the London Orchard Project to the Orchard Project. So we're now in cities as far north as Edinburgh and as far south as Bristol. And we also built up our team really, really rapidly. So that's some of them. So it's been an amazing journey. We've also expanded our range of activities now. So we've got our own juice and cider brand that's based in London. So it's basically using apples that would otherwise go to waste. So this is our cider brand called Local Fox. We're crowdfunding for it at the moment because it's grown quite quickly. So basically how this works is we have a network of 700 volunteers around London. And every year they come out and harvest fruit with us. So it can be from people's back gardens, it can be from some orchards in the kind of surrounding areas of London that kind of don't get very well looked after. So all these apples would not be harvested if it wasn't for what these volunteers do. And the other thing is all of the community groups we trained up, say 5 to 10 years ago, they've now got enough surplus fruit to be giving to us for the cider. And obviously we're giving them lots of cider back. So everyone wins. So it's been an amazing journey. I was lucky enough to win one of Roger Hamilton's runner-up prizes in 2016 for his Global Impact Awards, which was lovely. But actually the thing that really, really matters to me is the impact we've had in our community groups. So just to cite one example, this is one of our groups in the Orchard Estate in Greenwich, so called because it used to be covered in fruit trees. Now it's covered in those tower blocks. So they're a lovely group, and it was a few years ago now, we were having our yearly Orchard Leader get-together, so that's basically where they all come together and share stories. And this lovely man in the hat up here stood up and said, I lived in my flat in the Orchard Estate for 10 years, and I never knew anyone, so I was quite lonely, I lived quite an isolated existence. And as soon as this project happened, I suddenly had this whole group of friends, and it's completely transformed my life. And that, for me, was just the most moving moment. And since then, we've had the funding to kind of start looking at formal impact assessments. And so one of the things we found this year is 85% of our orchard volunteers feel more connected to their community and their neighbours through working on the orchards. And so the key lesson I want to share with you here is that when Karina and I set this project up, all we were thinking about was climate change mitigation, long-term food security. We didn't even think about the social impacts. But actually, this has become almost the most compelling thing now. So I would say, as an entrepreneur, don't underestimate your ability to have impacts that you can't even dream of today on people that you haven't met yet. They might be completely different people to what you imagine, completely different kinds of benefits. So don't underestimate your power as an entrepreneur to really have huge impacts on people. And remember that when it's tough, because honestly, it was so hard at the beginning. And you know, you've heard it before, but persistence is just so important. So that was the Orchard project. It's been an amazing journey. It continues to be so today. There was only one thing missing, and that was any kind of financial reward. So Karina and I always decided we would just put all the money into the charity and not pay ourselves. So I had to find another way to make a living. And the truth was, I had some savings. So these are my lovely grandparents, Ivor and Dorothy. They met at Manchester University in the 1930s studying chemistry. They fell in love and got married, and they were happily married for 70 years. They lived into their 90s, and they were just the best grandparents I could ever have asked for. And they sadly passed away in 2005. Now, unbeknownst to me, they'd saved up quite a lot of money. So I was lucky enough to inherit £80,000. Now, I was 25, I'd only ever had about 500 quid to my name, so that was an absolutely terrifyingly colossal amount of money. And at that time I had no financial education whatsoever, so I just didn't know what to do with it. And the only thing I knew was I want to do something that honours my grandparents' memory, that preserves the wealth and helps me build it up and pass it on to the next generation, so it's kind of like a legacy for them. So I thought, well, maybe I should invest in a property. The problem was I didn't know how to invest in a property, so I was like living in Clapham at the time, and I kept going to visit properties for about 2 years, and I always just talked myself out of it because I was so scared of getting it wrong. So in the end I just didn't buy anything, so I just put it in the bank, and it just sat there for 8 years. So in that time, I know, right? Oh. So in that time it's earned an average of 1% a year, so it earned a little bit, but in that same time period inflation averaged 3.3%. So in real terms I lost about 18 grand over that 8-year period. To make matters even worse, if I'd bloody got my act together in 2005, educated myself, and bought a property in Clapham where I was living, in that same period I'd have made a profit of about 350 grand. Yeah. So imagine what I could have done to support the Orchard project with that money. I know, it's so bad, isn't it, right? So it basically got to 2013, and I thought, this is ridiculous. I'm not honouring my grandparents' memory by just not sorting myself out and doing something with it. So I joined the Property Investors Network. So this is a national network. It's basically for people like me. They want to learn about how to invest in property and do it right, and it's a very supportive network, a bit like this one, so you can kind of bounce ideas off each other and get advice. So off the back of that, I got the knowledge and the skills and the confidence to finally buy my first property. So this is it. It's in the north side of Tunbridge Wells. As you can probably glean from the photo, it was not in a great state when I bought it, so completely stripped it out and started again. This is what it looks like today, in that same room. So since then, I've built up a small portfolio of rental properties, and this is the kind of standard that I'm offering to my tenants. So I manage all my own properties in Tunbridge Wells, and I've got a very close relationship with my tenants. I kind of look after them and put a Christmas tree in and give them presents and things at Christmas. So this is some of the feedback I've had from my tenants. Now, I don't know about you guys, but I do find in the media, landlords tend to get a bit of a bad rep. And I mean, have any of you ever rented a house with a really bad landlord? Because I have. I mean, I've had some really, especially when I was living in London in shared houses, I had some terrible landlords. I think my favourite story ever was my best friend at uni, Richard. It was his second year, and he was living in a kind of grotty student house. And their bath broke, so they rang their landlord, and he was like, yeah, I'll come round and fix it. And it took him a couple of weeks, which was kind of annoying because they had to go next door to shower. And then he finally came round, and Richard got home one day and walked into his room and looked out the back garden and looked out his window into the back garden. And he was like, oh, that bath that was in the neighbour's garden for the last 8 months isn't there anymore. And then he went in the bathroom, and the bath was in there. Oh. So he'd just taken this piece of rubbish from his neighbour's garden and put it in their house. And that's the kind of thing that, unfortunately, gives landlords a bad name, because those things do happen. But there are also loads and loads of landlords that are doing a brilliant job, and unfortunately you don't hear about that so much. But I do find if you offer a really first-class service that's very driven by your own values, that you do get very loyal tenants. I mean, some of my tenants have been with me since the beginning. So after I'd done a couple of rental properties, I then got approached by a couple of friends, and they basically said, you know what, I've got some savings as well, and I don't know what to do with them either. Would you be up for kind of taking a loan and kind of using them in your business and paying me a return? So that's what I started doing. I took a loan from a couple of them, and I've kind of built that up over time. This is some of the feedback I've had from my investors. So one of the guys that's invested with me, he's been with me for over 3 years now. And because of the interest I pay him every month, his wife had their second baby. She was able to stay at home. She didn't have to go back to work, which was lovely. And also, a lot of my investors are now buying their first properties, so I'm kind of holding their hand through it, making sure they do it all right and speak to the right people. So that's been really lovely. And off the back of that, I then set up Realm Investments last year to kind of reach out to other people that might be in the situation as me. It kind of makes me a bit angry about how there's a complete lack of financial education in schools. So I'm trying to fill a gap through doing that. So I suppose doing the orchard project and doing property might seem a bit disparate because, basically the orchard project is kind of an environmental activist or charity, and then there's the property world. So they seem a bit odd to be doing at the same time. But the one thing that's really consistent behind them is my values. So these are my top 4 values. I've only got really, really clear on these in the last year. Firstly, what they are, but secondly, what order they come in, and I didn't realise how important that was. So I've got an amazing coach, and she basically coached me to get to these. And since I've got clear on these, it's really had a positive impact on my personal life and my business. So if you'd asked me just over a year ago, what's your top value, I'd have guessed it was freedom, but I was never really sure because I felt like a bit of a hypocrite. Because sometimes I'd see people do things that really annoyed me. So, for example, one of my biggest pet hates is littering. It really pisses me off when I see someone just chucking something and expecting other people to clear it up after them. But then I thought, well, that's a free choice, actually, so maybe I don't really value freedom. But when I came up with this list, it made me realise, well, actually, because collaboration is number 1, I can't enjoy freedom unless it's in a collaborative context. Does that make sense? So that's why it's been so important to get to these. So now I've got this list, I just find it so much easier to make decisions. I find it easier to decide what business to take what direction to take my business in, which people I want to work with. It's just been amazing. So, well, what's next for me? Well, I'm really interested in bringing what I've done with the Orchard project and the property together. So I suppose I've been focusing more on interior design with the property, and I really like this concept about considering how a person will experience the room and their surrounding environment, and that's what makes good interior design. So I really want to start thinking about, well, could we apply that to exterior design as well? So this is probably quite a typical garden in the UK. It's paved over, it's low maintenance. Who feels inspired by this garden?
I feel at peace.
Do you? Because there's no work. There's no work. Yeah, okay. I can understand that, yeah. It's a selling point, right? Yeah. When you're looking at properties in the estate agent's house, it's a selling point.
I do feel at peace then.
Yeah.
It's an opportunity for something else.
Yeah, I like that. I like that. Could be an opportunity for something like that.
That may be the wrong answer for the people who are going to live there.
Yeah. Well, yes, I'm going to come on to that. I'm going to come on to that.
Because those people and their needs.
So that is something I've thought about is, well, like I'm a mum too. I just don't have time. I don't even know. I mean, even though I've set up the Orchard Project, I don't have a clue how to do gardening. And I don't have time to learn. Yeah. And like, if you don't, yeah, I mean, I could get you round, which would be great. Thank you, Alison. So actually, someone's thought about this already. So this is called the Green Infrastructure Standard. This is a small extract. It's actually a lot longer, but I've taken one extract out of it. And this is looking not just at gardens, but whole housing developments. And basically, to meet their standards, you have to kind of tick all these boxes. And one of the things they say is that green infrastructure should reflect and enhance the character of the local environment. So for me, this is really exciting because basically what it's saying is, instead of looking at our housing developments as we design the houses and then fit them into the landscape and squeeze them in as much as possible, we look at the landscape first, and then we design the houses around it. So that's, the implication is we're moving away from that kind of cookie cutter approach to housing development where you can go to one down the road and one 100 miles up north and not know which is which, to actually really preserving and respecting the local character of the landscape. So that for me is really exciting. And the other key thing I wanted to mention, which is that provision is made for long-term management. So with the Orchard Project, we've only worked with people who can prove that they're going to be up for maintaining it long-term. And I think the way that this could work is kind of having some kind of service charge where people can contribute to kind of maintain that standard. Now, there's loads and loads of evidence now that if you bring nature to people's doorsteps, they're more likely to want to adopt sustainable lifestyles. And we found in the Orchard Project that 98% of those involved with this believe their projects have had it's made them feel more positive about where they live, which is a lot of people. I mean, we were really surprised when we got that statistic, and actually it wasn't that complicated. I mean, it can be as few as 10 fruit trees, but it's the meaning that it gives to people, it's that sense of pride, and just that community feel. And this includes people who aren't interested in planting fruit trees, because they can have events around it that can involve everybody. So that's what I want to do next. Obviously, it's a huge thing, and I don't have all the answers yet, but that's where I want to take things. So I just want to leave you with a few images from the Orchard Project. This for me just shows how a small thing can completely transform the way people relate to their local environment. It can bring people together and just really create that kind of warm, fuzzy sense of community without being too fluffy. So yeah, that's me. Thank you so much for listening. And there are some links here if you want to see them.